Can I invite people who are standing to maybe sit down so that we can get started? Would you all like to sit down, please? Would you all like to sit down so that we can get started? Okay. So my name is Manju Shrestha, and with me I have my colleague Siddharth, Ravi. Both of us work at McAfee for one of the technical documentation teams at McAfee, and many of us you probably know by now that McAfee is part of Intel. Okay. So let me start this by asking some of you, what is the biggest project that some of you have worked on? Do I have a mic, Mac?
18 months.
18 months? Okay. Biggest project? Anyone? What is the biggest project you have ever worked for so far? Biggest project? Big. You should say that.
Yeah, I think every project is big.
Okay. Any other view? Depends. What you consider as big?
Anything which is 250 screens.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Estimates, right? Anyone this side?
Depends on the size of the product. Maybe should I turn it?
It's already on, I think.
Okay. So I think it depends on the amount of features. Sometimes features from 2 or more products are clubbed together and are offered on a newer platform.
Okay. Thank you. Someone here?
18 months.
18 months?
18 months.
Okay. 500 pages after 18 months. Anyone else? Here.
It depends on how many users you're reaching out to. So if you're reaching out to whether 10,000 or 25,000, that's how the project actually gets bigger and bigger.
Okay.
Because it becomes more complex.
Yes. Thank you. So, by definition, all of you have talked about different things about a project, right? In terms of probably scale, number of people involved, duration, number of screens, and so on. I think, personally, one of the biggest projects that I have been part of, I think is probably an Indian wedding, I would say. Nothing beats that, right? In terms of the duration of planning, the number of people involved, right? And everybody has an opinion on how it should be conducted, right? Like, for example, the bride's mother probably is thinking that, the saris should be like this. The bride's dad is probably worried about, how to manage the expenses probably. The groom's mother is probably worried about, okay, my side, so many people are going to come. Are everybody going to get this kind of gift, right? And likewise, the uncles, aunts, friends, everybody are worried about it. So there are so many people all around, trying to get to that point of making that wedding happen. But what do you see ultimately when the wedding is happening? Is it all smooth? Everything is going perfectly? What have you noticed? Some kind of confusion, chaos, all that is going around, yes? So ultimately, what is the goal of a wedding? The goal of a wedding is probably that there are 2 people who are trying to get married, right? And we are all there as close families and friends, just trying to make sure that those people are facilitated in that goal. But in the end, I think we focus on everything else except that. I remember one of the weddings that I have attended, some relative, and there was this, we do this homa and everything, right, on the wedding day. So the homa was over, and the bride and groom were left on the wedding dais, and the groom, right, nobody was paying attention to them, and the groom looked at the bride. They just had, been put together on the dais that day. They hadn't met before. So he said, what are we supposed to do? Do you know? And the bride replied, I don't know, I'm getting married for the first time myself, she said. So with that, probably.
Okay. So let's begin maybe now by defining our goals. There are many goals that each of us as technical writers kind of have to aspire to in our daily jobs, and they come in different forms. It's either the organization or our individual goals. etc. But let's start defining each of those goals and take a look at what they are. That he'll have to do it for me. Can you increase the
This
volume?
one? The volume of that.
Is this
speaker.
better?
He has a mic actually.
I have a column mic. I think it's.
There is a column mic. Oh, is it? Okay.
Is it better now? Yeah? Oh, all right. Yeah.
What about this one? Am I audible? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So the goals.
So that takes us to the next one, which is the documentation team's goal. So anybody wants to give a quick thought about what we think as the doc team's goals? This should be simple, right? This is about us. Very simple ones. What do you think is our goal?
Let me get your mic.
Agreed, completely.
Making users experience with software smooth.
You're right, absolutely.
It's basically bridging the gap between the product and the user.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Anyone else?
Rajiv.
Make quality documentation.
Okay, great.
Ultimately, make sure your docs are delivered on the FCS date.
Bang on target. That's also one goal.
To increase the production cost, maybe like if you have to set up a customer call center, it involves a lot of cost.
Yeah.
So the documentation team can just bring down the cost.
To reduce the support cost, you're saying.
I thought it's an innovative idea also.
That's what I meant, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Hopefully no one from support is there. He might just get upset with you. Okay. So I think all of you are right. Absolutely bang on target. So, my personal experience, as writers, right? When we get into a project, depending on, whatever methodologies we are following, whether we are following waterfall model and whether we are following agile, depends, whatever you're following, doesn't really matter. But when a project starts, you do a concept commit, you do a plan commit, or in agile, you do release planning, whatever you do, what happens is you're given a set of features, right? And then you're told that, okay, now you've got this, go ahead and plan. Figure out what you need to do, right? So as writers, what do? We try to put together a template, which is already in place for big companies, small companies. We try to put together a template. We use that and put all the data that we have at that time, whatever we understand, into a template. We send it out for reviews, and then we get a sign-off. Then we start writing about it. Then we get it reviewed, and then we get into production, and then it goes out, right? We've done everything right. We have followed the style guide. We have made sure that the spell checks are done, all the right, correct, good words are used. We have made sure all the developers, QA engineers, support involved, everybody have reviewed, right? All that is done. What happens on the FCS date? Like she said, we should release on the FCS date. We did that also. We met everything on time, delivered on time, followed all the process, and yet you release, and day 2, we go to customer forum and somebody asks a question which we haven't answered in our documentation, right? So apart from the standards, deciding the words to use, and yes, I forgot the big one, localization. How can I forget that, right? And coming back to Rajiv's data on that, he talked about, I think, 6% people talking English language in the world, right? It depends, every statistics that we use, it has to be used sometimes also with the complete perspective, right? Let's say you work for a product, right, which sells very well. Let's say it sells in the entire world and generates, let's say, $250 million a year, right? That's a huge amount for a company to get as revenue, right? $250 million is a huge amount of money. Now, if that particular product actually has 60% of its sales happening in North America, I don't know whether localization is really their focus or should be their focus, right? So I think just because some company is doing it doesn't mean that every company needs to do that. But localization, yes, that's another thing that we focus on, right? So we've taken care of that also. But end of the day, after the release, customer is immediately complaining, saying, yeah, you talked about X, Y, and Z, but you didn't tell, this is my scenario, how do I take care of that, right? So this is generally the thing. But what happens, after doing everything, what does your manager come back and tell you when a question like that comes on the forum? He says, how come you didn't address this? I'm very unhappy, right? And here you're left behind feeling frustrated because you did everything that you could, right? You followed everything that you were asked to, and yet your manager is unhappy, customer is unhappy, somebody is already noticing that this documentation, this particular guide that you wrote is being pulled out in the forum and being discussed, right? I'm sure known scenario.
Okay. So now that we've had a look at documentation team's goal, and I'm guessing majority of us work in a documentation team, it's natural for us to first think of what our individual goals should be as a documentation team. And now I suppose the next level would be to figure out what the company's goals are. So can anybody kind of tell me what a company's goals might be? Okay, thank you. Anybody? Productivity.
Productivity,
Yep, absolutely.
yes, absolutely.
Reduce support cost?
Reduce support cost, yes.
Absolutely, because every organization values money, so it's reduce support costs. Anything else? Customer satisfaction? Yeah, absolutely, bang on. The bottom line, profitability? Yes, correct. Increase revenue? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
More number of customers, absolutely,
Definitely.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry?
So increased revenue can be different from more number of customers. Everybody gets that, right? I can get more revenue from the same customer, but I also want more customers. Both are possible.
You had something.
Be available when they need you.
Yes, absolutely. Correct. To answer
One
questions.
more there,
I think one
last.
more question there. One more answer.
Product diversification.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. Innovation and improving
Do
products.
you have one more? Yes.
Make the product useful, like
Okay.
put it into use.
Correct. It has to serve the purpose that they
Right.
pay for. Yep. Correct. Okay. So I think they're all good points and they're all valid. And I think we come across these situations, if not every day, we're at least informed of these things every now and again. So someone mentioned profitability. Of course, I mean, if our salaries have to be paid, organizations have to thrive well. And reduce costs because, a penny saved is a penny earned, so of course. And beating the competition, yep. So a lot of things go hand in hand there. We've got to keep innovating, we've got to keep coming up with good products, and we've got to beat the competition. And of course, satisfied customers, because that is when they're going to return if they're going to buy more. Now, so what is the next thing? I suppose it would be...
So the next thing is obviously, we've looked at us, right? The doc team, what is our goal? What does the company want out of us and out of this whole project? But what does the customer finally want out of us? That is what I think, the customer, right? So the customer, I'm sure you'll all agree that, Seth, you want to put the, yeah. So some of the things that the customer, right? I want to pay less and get more. That's the first thing. Whether I'm buying a huge refrigerator or I'm buying a mobile phone or a pen or whatever, right? Always the thing is I want to pay less but get maximum out of it, right? That's my first thing. Or even if I pay a lot of it, even if I pay something, a huge amount, it's very expensive, I want complete ROI, the return of investment of what money I have paid, right? Once I've bought it, I want it to be very easy to use. I don't want to read anything. The customer doesn't want to read anything, right? That's how it is. So it wants it to be very easy. I don't want to, encounter any issues, no errors, right? If I happen to encounter an error, then I want the company or the seller to give me a solution immediately. I call up and they should have a solution, right? I don't want to be transferred from this customer support desk to that, for 1 hour and still I don't get a solution, right? I don't want to be in a situation like that. So as a customer, I want my life to remain simple as it was before I bought that product. I don't want it to get complicated because I bought your product, right? That's what the customer wants. And with that, now we have the 3 perspectives: doc teams, companies, and customers. So what is the collective goal here?
Okay. So the collective goal, of course, is to have happy customers. You've got to make sure that every product you sell, every individual product you sell, a customer is satisfied. It meets his or her goals. It meets, it gives him or her the right ROI, the return on investment, and all of these things. And in addition to that, I think the other win as a company, as a business, is when your customer goes out and recommends you to another 3-4 people. I think the value of people communicating and marketing your company through word of mouth is invaluable. And I think each of us recognizes this. Let's take, for instance, a daily life example, right? So as a man, you probably walk into an expensive salon and you think, okay, I don't know what an expensive haircut is, about $500. So you walk in there and you think it's an expensive salon, so this guy better do a good job. So, and say he does a good job, so you'd obviously come out, and if you're satisfied with it, you'd go and tell your friends that this is an expensive place, but he does a great job, and you enjoyed the experience. He's polite, he's clean, and he's really nice. So, and he gives you a good haircut at the end of it all. So let's say I recommend him to 5 of my friends. Now 5 of my friends visit the same guy and pay him $500 each. Now that's already a cost of, what is that, 500 into 6, 3,000 rupees over just me and my friends. Now over a span of a year, this guy has made close to 36,000 rupees just through us. And let's assume that each of my 5 friends have gone and recommended him to 5 of their friends. So that's the value in word of mouth and being marketed through word of mouth. So eventually, it has to all translate to a happy customer, which is when our organizations thrive, which is when we can grow as individuals. Okay, so now that we've recognized all of these goals, the important thing is how do we achieve them? So let's get down to work and figure that out.
So by now you would have figured that we are not talking about specific ways of doing things, or it's more of a philosophy that we're discussing here. So with that same thought, the know your product, right? That's the fundamental. We always say that the content core, right? That is something that we should always have expertise on. So knowing our product is the first step towards our success, right? So every time you look at a product, right, usually, the moment we get into a planning phase, what happens is, we always get driven by a number of features, how to do this, right? But always take a step back and figure out what is it that problem that your company is trying to solve by coming up with this product or this feature, right? The other part of the problem that we usually face as writers is also that, let's say, the product has got, in this release, around 10 features, right? So let's say we are a team of 5 writers, so the manager assigns saying, okay, I'm very fair, I put 2 features for you, 2, all of us are doing. So what happens, I take care of my feature, my peer is doing another 2 features, I don't get into that because, it's like stepping on his or her toes is what I would think, right? So I wouldn't get into that. I worry about mine. So ultimately what happens, we know well our features, but the overall, the big picture, like Swati was saying in the previous one, right? Somehow we miss the big picture because I know feature X, but how does feature X with feature Y? Or are they really supposed to work together? Is there any value in those 2 working together? We don't really ponder over that, right? So that's one of the things that, as writers, we can do very well. Even if you go back and talk to your developers and QA engineers, you will find that, the particular feature they are developing or they are testing, they generally are good at that. But just by the sheer ratio, right? Usually, if you have worked in organizations over a period of time, you will know that the dev QA ratio to a writer is usually quite different. In probably good organizations, maybe, 10, 15, 20 dev QA versus 1. But in many organizations, there could be like 35, 40 dev QA versus 1 writer, right? So in that scenario, you are pushed to a situation where all those developers, QAs, whatever they developed, tested, you as a writer must know everything. And while that looks like a challenge, that's also an advantage. Because you are that connector who can put all of that together, right? And that's the picture that the customer needs to know, that all of these, how do they come together as one big picture, right? So that's one of the things. The other thing is, in the panel discussion also, we were talking about, things like, okay, I talk to my, SME, or I see the information in the forum, and therefore I put that information, right? But what is the other thing that is most important? The most important thing, I think, is to do it yourself, right? If I'm writing about digging, the best way to write it is, I want to dig. I exactly know what I'm supposed to be writing about after that, right? So any product that you are going to write about, The best way is to be hands-on, try it out yourself, give developers, QAs a difficult time, ask them difficult questions. If they can't answer, go to the next level, go to product management, involve support so that they can give you early feedback, right? All of those helps you know your product better. Now, the other thing is, you have the product. Many writers, when they come to my organization and I interview them, I ask them, do you know where your product is downloaded from? 99% of the time I hear, I don't know. It's something, I think as writers, I think we should bother about. This is the product that I write for. At least I should know what is the user experience, not just for documentation, but for the product itself, right? How do I download that? And I have had cases where some of the writers didn't even know how the documentation itself actually gets downloaded, where all it gets posted, right? So I did my job, I produced it, I handed off, my job is done. No. If you are part of that organization, if you're part of that unit, it's always helpful to know end to end what's going on, right? Apart from that, the selling, right? The price of the product. Most of us, we write a great product, we know it's great, doing very well in the market, but we don't know what the price is most of the times. But I think it helps a lot for you to know that particular price, how much it actually costs, right? And finally, the price versus the value we are giving back to the customer. The price is $20,000, let's say, for a product that they buy, but is the value that they're getting out of that is also $20,000 or less or more, right? So what is the value that they're getting out? Like, I can give you examples of some of the things there. Like, one of the products that I write for, or, I have, people along with me, we all write for together, complex enough, but it's also something like, it's used across multiple domains. So there is the banking domain using it, but there's also the US federal, the Department of Defense using it on one side. So they're very different customers, right? Each has a very different requirement. A banking unit probably doesn't care so much about, the password protection so much, like crypto, all these, extra protection for how the username, password is done. But the DoD, the Department of Defense would care about that quite a bit, right? So if you know what kind of audience you have, if you know what kind of, product that you are catering out to which kind of domains, I think that helps you decide what exactly you're writing about. And like we always say, writing is actually 80% of thinking and 20% only is writing. So if you do all these together, you exactly know where your focus needs to be. And who else to listen to than Steve Jobs when you talk about products, right? So one of the quotes from him, he says, I used to say Apple should be the Sony of this business. But in reality, Apple should be the Apple of the business, right? And we come to the next part, which is, do you want to share the joke there? Okay, should I explain that? Or somebody else wants to give a try. What's your name? Can you please?
One?
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah. I think there, the gentleman in the backside.
Yeah, I really didn't get that
the quote?
Quote, yeah.
The
quote,
Apple, the Apple
quote.
bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Sony bit, actually.
The Sony bit? Yeah. So you have to get the context of when he said it. In visual medium, right? I think Sony is considered what? The best, in that medium. And, one of the initial goals that Apple had, as Steve Jobs is trying to say, is in the beginning days, they thought we had to be as good as Sony. But, Steve Jobs created something where Apple became a brand by itself, right? Yes. Sure. Okay.
A technical writer caught in a time warp walked along a path happy to be away from his job. He worked hard but was still unhappy, and he did not know why. While walking along, he came across 3 woodcutters working. Interested to find out what they were working on, he asked the first lumberjack what he was doing. I'm cutting wood, said he. Still no wiser, the technical writer turned to the second lumberjack and asked him what he was doing. I'm cutting this block of wood to make sure that it's square and its dimensions are uniform so that it will fit exactly in its place in a floor. A bit closer to finding out what the lumberjacks were working on, but still unclear, the technical writer turned to the third lumberjack. He seemed to be the happiest of the three, and when asked what he was doing, replied, I'm building a ship.
And that's where we end. We thank you all for having been part of this presentation. And happy to take any questions if you have.
Yeah, any questions? Okay. So thanks a lot. I'll request Kiran Mai to come on and hand over the certificates. This is for Manju. Thanks a lot for a really learned session.
Thank you. That take yours. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kiran Mai.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Rajiv.